I thought he was going to kiss me. Instead, he said very quietly, "Do you know what? I'm going to kill you."
We expect killers to look a certain way. Creeps in alleyways, strangers in vans, monsters hiding in the dark. Not chart toppers, not Olympic champions, not people with million-dollar smiles and movie deals. But fame doesn't mean innocence. In some cases, it hides the guilt. These were household names, celebrities, role models, and they killed, some on purpose, some by accident, some with weapons, others with cars, fists, or silence. Some went to prison, others walked free. But all of them left a body behind. This is the side of fame they don't show you. Not red carpets, not award shows, just blood, death, and people too powerful to fall, until they did. Oscar Pistorius, the Blade Runner's fall.
In recent years, most of the stories written about Oscar Pistorius centered around his drive to beat the fastest runners in the world despite being born without functional legs. Well, now all anyone cares about is what drove this Olympian to shoot his girlfriend 4 times in the early hours of Valentine's Day.
He was more than an athlete. He was a symbol. Oscar Pistorius, the double amputee sprinter who defied biology and physics to race against able-bodied Olympians, nicknamed the Blade Runner for the carbon fiber prosthetics that carried him across finish lines, he was hailed as a miracle of determination, a South African hero, proof that nothing was impossible. But behind the medals, the sponsorships, the headlines, was a man spiraling. And on Valentine's Day, 2013, the illusion shattered. Pistorius claimed it was a mistake, that he thought an intruder had broken into his home, that he fired 4 shots through a locked bathroom door in fear. But the person on the other side wasn't a burglar. It was Reva Steenkamp, his girlfriend, a model, an activist, shot in the head, hip and arm with a 9mm pistol, dead before help could arrive. The police didn't buy his story. Neither did the public once the details emerged. Previous reports of screaming, fights, domestic disturbances, a history of aggression, a man who was unraveling under the weight of fame and paranoia. What followed was one of the most sensational trials in modern history, a global spectacle. Pistorius wept in court, vomited at the autopsy photos, claimed it was all a tragic accident. At first, the court agreed. He was convicted of culpable homicide, manslaughter, sentenced to just 5 years, but public outrage surged. Appeals followed. And in 2017, the South African Supreme Court of Appeal upgraded his sentence to murder. 15 years, with eligibility for parole in 2023. Oscar Pistorius had gone from icon to inmate. The man who once outran doubt couldn't outrun what he'd done. He wasn't a champion anymore. He was a killer, and he wasn't the only one who fell from glory. Because the next man didn't shoot out of fear. He pulled the trigger just to see what it sounded like. Phil Spector, The Sound of Violence.
Rock music producer Phil Spector was convicted Monday of second-degree murder in the shooting death of actress Lana Clarkson.
He changed the sound of music, wall of sound, chart-topping hits, legends like the Beatles and Tina Turner calling him a genius. Phil Spector wasn't just a producer, he was the producer. A reclusive architect of pop who turned studios into temples and singers into icons. His fingerprints were all over the 1960s, but behind the soundproof glass was a man unraveling, paranoid, abusive, obsessed with control. Artists whispered about his mood swings, partners spoke of threats, locked rooms, loaded guns. And then, on February 3rd, 2003, it all caught up with him. Lana Clarkson, actress, hostess, 40 years old. She met Spector at a club. Hours later, she was dead, shot in the mouth inside his mansion, slumped in a chair. A .38 revolver in her hand, but the story didn't add up. Spector told police, "I think I just shot somebody." Then later claimed she kissed the gun. But the forensic evidence told a different story. Blood spatter, gun residue, the angle of the wound. It wasn't suicide, it was execution. The trial was a circus. Mistrials, celebrity witnesses, tabloids feeding on every twist. And through it all, Spector sat motionless, wig askew, eyes cold. In 2009, he was finally convicted of second-degree murder, 19 years to life. Phil Spector died in prison in 2021 alone, forgotten by the industry he helped build. He once turned chaos into symphonies, but in the end, the only sound left was a gunshot. And as haunting as that is, Wait until you hear what happened when a rising Hollywood star took a vacation and killed someone with his car. Matthew Broderick, the holiday that killed. In 1987, Matthew Broderick was untouchable. Fresh off Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he was America's favorite troublemaker. Charming, clever, the guy who always got away with it. But that summer, on a narrow road in Northern Ireland, real life caught up with him. Broderick was on vacation with Jennifer Grey, his co-star, and at the time, his secret girlfriend. They were driving through the countryside in a rented BMW, escaping the paparazzi, enjoying the quiet, until they crossed into the wrong lane. They slammed head-on into another car, killing 2 women instantly, Anna Gallagher, 28th, Margaret Doherty, 63rd, a mother and daughter, locals, gone in a flash. Broderick was hospitalized with a fractured leg and ribs. Grey suffered whiplash, but the focus quickly shifted to accountability. He said he didn't remember the crash, that it was a blur, an accident. Police charged him with causing death by dangerous driving, a serious offense that could have meant years behind bars, but in court, the charge was reduced. He paid a $175 fine. That was it, no jail, no probation, no public reckoning, just silence, a return to Hollywood, and a career that never missed a beat. The families were devastated. They called it a slap in the face. They waited for an apology. For acknowledgement, it never really came. Broderick moved on, made more movies, stayed famous, but Anna and Margaret, they didn't get sequels or second chances, just a cemetery plot and a footnote in a celebrity story. And while Broderick's past was quietly buried, the next case exploded into headlines, because the next man wasn't in a car. He was in his mansion, with a shotgun, a teammate, and a cover-up that unraveled like a bad playbook. Jason Williams, the shot that wasn't in the game.
And when I went to slap the gun closed to hand it, I didn't even know that Mr. Christophe was in the house there. The gun went off and hit Mr. Christophe in the chest, and it killed him instantly.
He had it all. NBA All-Star, power forward for the New Jersey Nets, a $90 million contract, charisma, charm, endorsements. Jason Williams wasn't just a player, he was a franchise. And off the court, he loved the spotlight just as much. Parties, mansions, guns, lots of guns. Then came the night of February 14, 2002. Williams was hosting friends at his estate in New Jersey. One of them was Costa's Gus Christophe, a 55-year-old limo driver hired to take guests home. Quiet, professional, completely unaware that he'd never leave the house alive. At some point, Williams decided to show off. He picked up a shotgun, pretended it wasn't loaded, pointed it at Christophe, and pulled the trigger. The blast tore through Christophe's chest, killed him instantly. What followed was not shock or remorse. It was damage control. Williams ordered his friends to lie, wiped down the gun, moved the body, tried to stage the scene as an accident. But the truth leaked. Witnesses cracked. The cover-up crumbled. The case dragged for years, mistrials, appeals, delays. Williams stayed in the spotlight, writing a memoir, appearing on talk shows, preaching about redemption. But justice caught up. In 2010, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He served 18 months. Today he speaks about second chances, about forgiveness, but that doesn't bring Gus Christophe back. Williams made millions shooting hoops, but the shot that defined his life wasn't on the court. And if you think that's disturbing, wait until you hear about the next man, because he turned boxing into an empire and beat a man to death long before he made his first dollar. Don King, the knockout that wasn't in the ring. Before the $1 million fights, before the iconic hair and deals with Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson, Don King was just another man on the streets of Cleveland. And those streets ran red. In 1966, King wasn't a boxing promoter. He was a numbers runner, a street hustler with debts to collect and a reputation to keep. One day, he confronted a man named Sam Garrett, an employee who owed him $600. It wasn't a negotiation, it was an execution. Witnesses say King chased Garrett down the street, cornered him, stomped him to death on the sidewalk, with his bare feet, in front of neighbors, in broad daylight. Police arrived to find Garrett's skull caved in, his body broken. Don King was charged with second-degree murder, but he had a good lawyer. He pleaded it down to manslaughter, claimed it was self-defense, served just under 4 years in prison. And when he got out, the real career began. He climbed the ranks of boxing fast, promoting the rumble in the jungle, the thriller in Manila, building a fortune off the fists of legends. He smiled for cameras, made handshake deals, rubbed shoulders with presidents. But the blood never left his past. 2 people died at Don King's hands. Yes, 2. Years earlier, he shot and killed a man trying to rob one of his gambling houses. That one was ruled justified. Garrett's death? Not so clean, but boxing forgave. The world forgot. And Don King laughed all the way to the bank. He turned violence into a brand. And if that doesn't chill you, the next case will. Because the woman who killed wasn't a gangster or a hustler. She was a pop star, a role model. And the accident she caused left a family destroyed. Brandy Norwood, the crash that shattered a life. She was America's sweetheart, a platinum-selling R&B artist, star of her own hit sitcom Moshe, the face of Barbie dolls and Disney movies. Brandy Norwood wasn't just famous, she was adored. But on December 30th, 2006, that image was shattered. Brandy was driving her Land Rover on the 405 freeway in Los Angeles. Midday, traffic heavy, normal. Until she didn't notice the cars slowing down ahead. She slammed into the back of a Toyota Corolla. That impact triggered a chain reaction. 4 cars total, bodies thrown, metal crumpled, and in the front car, 38-year-old Awatef Abudihaj, a wife and mother of 2, was critically injured. She died the next day from her injuries. The cause? Brandy's inattention, no drugs, no alcohol, no cell phone use, just a momentary lapse, one that ended a life. Police investigated. Charges were considered. But in the end, no criminal case was filed. Instead, Brandy faced multiple civil lawsuits. She settled out of court, paid millions in damages, but no trial, no verdict, no formal guilt, just headlines and silence. Brandy disappeared from the spotlight for a while. When she returned, she avoided questions about the crash. In interviews, she called it her worst nightmare, said she prayed for the victim's family every day. But prayers don't raise the dead. And for the family of Awatef Abudihaj, the pain never settled. Because even when a killer doesn't mean to kill, someone still dies. And if Brandy's case was accidental, the next one was anything but. The man on trial next? He stood in front of a jury with murder on his rap sheet and platinum albums on the shelves. Because before he was a legend, Snoop Dogg stood accused of pulling the trigger. Snoop Dogg. Murder was the case.
If Malik would have waited another second, I might not be here doing an interview with you right now. If he would have waited another half a second, I might have a hole in my head. He might have a hole in his head. He might have a hole in his arm. You never know.
Long before he was the smooth-talking, weed-smoking, family-friendly face of commercials and cookbooks with Martha Stewart, Snoop Dogg stood on the edge of a murder conviction. It was 1993. He had just exploded onto the scene with Doggy Style, his debut album that redefined West Coast rap. But behind the studio sessions and music videos, real violence was brewing. One night in Los Angeles, Snoop and his bodyguard McKinley Lee got into an altercation with a rival gang member, Philip Waldemariam. Words were exchanged, tension escalated, and in the chaos, someone pulled a gun. Waldemariam was shot and killed. Snoop was charged with first-degree murder. The trial was massive. Cameras outside the courtroom, protesters, fans, media frenzy. The prosecution claimed Snoop had lured Waldemariam to his death, that it wasn't self-defense. It was premeditated. Snoop denied it all. He said he was trying to get away, that his bodyguard acted on instinct, that it was the streets, not a setup. And in 1996, after years of legal drama, he was acquitted. Free to walk, free to rap, free to build an empire. But the shadow never fully left. Snoop turned the experience into music. His track, Murder Was the Case, wasn't just a hit. It was autobiography. He leaned into the persona, reinvented himself, survived where others crumbled. Today, Snoop is a brand, a mogul, a pop culture juggernaut, but once, he was inches from life in prison. And while he walked free, the next man ended up behind bars, because the star of The Shield wasn't playing a cop on TV anymore. He was about to become the prime suspect in a real-life murder. Michael Jace, the cop who couldn't hide the crime. On screen, he was the good guy, a moral compass in the corrupt world of The Shield, a cop who believed in justice, even when surrounded by darkness. But off-screen, Michael Jace was unraveling. Money problems, marriage trouble, a temper that simmered beneath the surface. And on May 19, 2014, it all erupted. That night, Jace and his wife April had a fight. Not the first. But this one turned violent, deadly. Their two sons, ages 8 and 10, were in the house. They heard it all. And then, they heard the gunshots. April Jace, mother, counselor, athlete, was shot 3 times in the legs, execution style. Jace later told police he wanted her to feel pain, to suffer. She bled out in front of her children. Then, in a surreal twist, Jace called 911 himself, calm, almost polite. "I shot my wife," he said. "I'm unarmed. I'm waiting for police." He didn't run. He didn't resist. He just waited. At trial, he claimed it wasn't premeditated, that he was angry, that he snapped. But no one believed it was an accident. The jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years to life. The courtroom was silent. The children, now orphans, sat in the wreckage of what their father had done. Michael Jace played a cop, but the only bars he sees now are the ones on his cell. And if you think that's the most tragic transformation on this list, wait. Because the next figure wasn't a fictional enforcer. He was a punk icon, and his story ended with heroin, blood, and the woman he said he loved. Sid Vicious, love, heroin, and a knife. He wasn't known for talent. He was known for chaos. Sid Vicious, bassist for the Sex Pistols, punk's most infamous flameout. Spiky hair, snarling lips, a walking overdose with a bass guitar. But what started as rebellion turned into something darker. And it all came to a head in room 100 of New York's Chelsea Hotel. October 12, 1978. Nancy Spungen, Sid's girlfriend, his drug partner, his everything, was found dead on the bathroom floor. A single stab wound to the abdomen. Blood everywhere. Sid was charged with second-degree murder. He said he didn't remember what happened. Too high. Too out of it. One moment they were fighting, the next, she was dead. The press went wild. Punk had always flirted with death. Now it was soaked in it. Bail was posted, Sid was released, but the spiral only tightened. Just 4 months later, before the trial could begin, Sid Vicious died of a heroin overdose at a party, 21 years old. Beside him, a note supposedly written earlier, "We had a death pact and I have to keep my half of the bargain." Whether it was murder or a tragic accident, we'll never know. But one thing was clear. Sid didn't just destroy himself. He took someone with him. And if you think that's a one-off punk tragedy, think again. Because the next story involves another famous transformation. Not from artist to killer, but from athlete to icon. And one deadly crash that changed everything. Caitlyn Jenner, the crash behind the headlines. Before the magazine covers, before the coming out interviews, before she became a global symbol for transgender visibility, Caitlyn Jenner was Bruce Jenner, Olympic gold medalist, American hero, reality TV star. But in February 2015, she became something else. A driver, in a deadly crash. It happened on the Pacific Coast Highway. Jenner was behind the wheel of a Cadillac Escalade towing a trailer. Traffic was heavy. The road curved. And for reasons still debated, Jenner rear-ended a Lexus, pushing it into oncoming traffic. The Lexus was struck head-on by a Hummer. Inside the Lexus was 69-year-old Kim Howe. She died instantly. Police launched an investigation. There was talk of speeding, of distraction. Jenner wasn't texting, wasn't drunk, but she was towing a heavy load and driving too fast for the conditions. Manslaughter charges were considered, but never filed. Instead, Jenner faced civil lawsuits. Multiple. She settled them quietly. No admission of guilt, no criminal conviction. Just headlines and outrage. To her supporters, she was brave. To her critics, she was shielded by fame, protected by lawyers, untouchable. Jenner later called the crash a terrible accident, said she prays for Kim Howe's family. But one truth remains. A woman died, and no one was held criminally responsible. Fame didn't just soften the blow, it erased it. And if that feels like a betrayal of justice, the next story offers no comfort, because the man you're about to meet went from sitcom star to a man accused of murder in cold blood. Robert Blake, the gun in the glove box. He played tough guys, cops, detectives, heroes with edge. Robert Blake had a face built for noir and a voice made for courtroom dramas. From Beretta to In Cold Blood, he spent decades on screen solving crimes, until he became the prime suspect in one. May 4th, 2001, Los Angeles. Blake and his wife, Bonnie Lee Backley, had dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. They left, walked to their parked car. She got in. He said he forgot his gun inside, went back to the restaurant. When he returned, she was dead, shot in the head, twice, still sitting in the passenger seat. Blake told police he had nothing to do with it, that someone must have been waiting, that maybe her shady past, fraud, ex-lovers, bad deals had caught up to her. But the gun that killed her, found in a dumpster nearby, unregistered, cold, clean. And while Blake's gun wasn't the murder weapon, his story had holes. Witnesses came forward claiming he'd tried to hire someone to kill her, that he hated her, that their marriage was toxic from day one. The trial was explosive. Celebrity murder cases always are. And in 2005, Blake was found not guilty. But the civil case didn't go the same way. A jury ruled he was liable for her wrongful death, ordered him to pay $30 million. He filed for bankruptcy, faded into obscurity, and died in 2023. To this day, no one else has been charged with Bonnie Lee Backley's murder. The killer walked away from that car, and maybe so did Robert Blake. But if his guilt was debated, the next man's crimes weren't. Because the next story isn't about whispers or cover-ups. It's about a football star who went from the Super Bowl to a suicide note and left bodies in between. Aaron Hernandez. Touchdowns, tattoos, and a body in the dirt. He had it all. Super Bowl rings in reach. A $40 million contract. A place on the New England Patriots next to Tom Brady. Aaron Hernandez wasn't just an NFL star. He was the future. A tight end with hands like glue and speed that crushed defenses. But under the helmet was something rotten. And it started long before the headlines. Gang ties, fights, guns, whispers of violence that followed him from Florida to Foxborough. But the Patriots looked the other way. So did the league. As long as he scored, no one asked questions. Until June 2013. Odin Lloyd's body was found in a gravel pit near Hernandez's mansion. Shot 6 times, execution style. He was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée. They had partied together days earlier. Now he was dead. Security footage showed Hernandez with a gun. Tire tracks matched his rental car. Bullet casings, clothes, texts, everything pointed to him. And when police raided his home, they didn't just find evidence. They found the real Aaron Hernandez, a man with a secret arsenal, surveillance systems, destruction of evidence, lies upon lies. He was arrested, dropped by the Patriots, tried and convicted, life without parole. But the story didn't end there, because while behind bars, Hernandez was charged with another double murder. From 2012, drive-by shooting, dispute over a spilled drink. He beat those charges, and then he hanged himself in his cell in 2017, just days after being acquitted in the second case. Just hours after calling his fiancée. Next to his body, Bible verses, a note, a final twist. A man who had everything, fame, wealth, power, and still chose violence. Hernandez wasn't a cautionary tale. He was a time bomb, and if his story felt like a fall from grace, the next one is pure madness. Because the next man didn't kill with a gun or a knife. He got in a car, drunk, and tore a life in half. Vince Neil, fast cars, dead friends, and no consequences. He was the voice of excess, lead singer of Motley Crue. Hair teased to the heavens, leather pants glued to his skin, a bottle in one hand and chaos in the other. Vince Neil was the sound of the 80s, loud, wild, and completely out of control. But one night in 1984, that chaos turned deadly. Neil got behind the wheel of his red '72 Ford Pantera. He'd been drinking, a lot. Riding shotgun was Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer for Hanoi Rocks, another rock band on the rise. They were heading out for more booze. They never made it back. Neil lost control, swerved into oncoming traffic, and slammed head-on into another car. The impact was brutal. Dingley was killed instantly. The passengers in the other vehicle suffered brain damage and severe injuries. It wasn't just a crash. It was a massacre. Neil's blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit. He was arrested, charged with vehicular manslaughter and DUI. The sentence, 30 days in jail. He served 15, paid some fines, did community service, released a tribute song, and went back on tour. Razzle stayed dead. The other victims spent years in rehab. And Vince? He kept singing. It was the ultimate rock star loophole. Kill a man, pay the fee, and walk out the other side with your career intact. The crash didn't ruin him, it defined him. But decades before Vince Neil sang his first note, another star fell even harder. A silent film icon, a comedy legend, accused of something so vile it nearly destroyed Hollywood itself. Fatty Arbuckle, the fall of Hollywood's first giant. Before Chaplin, before Keaton, before any modern movie star ever graced a screen, there was Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. He was the king of silent comedy, one of the highest paid actors in the world, a household name before most households even had electricity. But in 1921, his fame detonated, and the body at the center of it all was Virginia Rappe. She was an actress, young, ambitious, hoping for her big break. She attended a party in Arbuckle's hotel suite at the St. Francis in San Francisco. Booze flowed, music played, doors closed. What happened next depends on who you ask. But within hours, Virginia was screaming in pain. She died days later of internal injuries, a ruptured bladder, peritonitis, and whispers turned to headlines that Arbuckle had assaulted her, crushed her, used a Coke bottle, that he laughed as she writhed on the floor. None of it was proven, but none of it mattered. He was arrested, charged with manslaughter. The press went feral. Protesters swarmed the theaters. His films were pulled, his name blacklisted. The trial? A circus. 3 of them, actually. The first 2 ended in hung juries. The third finally acquitted him, with a written apology from the jury for the nightmare he'd endured. But it was too late. His career was dead. His reputation ruined. He tried to direct under pseudonyms, tried to act again. Nothing stuck. He died in 1933 of a heart attack. Hollywood forgot him, but Virginia was never remembered much at all. And if that sounds like the end of a tragedy, there's one more tale to tell. A man who lived and died on stage, who won an Oscar, and then in a moment of madness, pulled the trigger on the woman he loved. Gig Young, Oscar, madness, and a murder-suicide. He had the voice, the charm, the face that made casting directors smile. Gig Young was Hollywood royalty. Smooth, dashing, always a drink in hand on screen and off. He won an Academy Award in 1970 for They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Playing a broken-down MC soaked in booze and desperation. Art imitating life. Because off-camera, Gig was unraveling. Alcohol, failed marriages, financial trouble, whispers of bipolar disorder. He was the kind of man who could light up a room and disappear from it in the same breath. Then, in 1978, he shocked the world. Just weeks after marrying his 5th wife, Kim Schmidt, a young German actress, he invited her to his New York apartment. They never left. Neighbors heard nothing, no screaming, no fight, just silence, until the cleaning lady found them both dead. She was slumped on the floor, shot once in the head. He was lying nearby. Same fate. The gun was found in Gig's hand. There was no note, no explanation, just a body count and a man who had everything, fame, money, love, and still ended it all with a bullet. Police ruled it a murder-suicide. Hollywood was stunned, but not surprised, because the warning signs were always there. Smiles too wide, performances too raw, a man playing the role of himself and losing grip. And with that final shot, the curtain fell. But Gig Young wasn't alone. He was one of many, a gallery of fame, wealth, and unthinkable violence. Because for all their fortune, these weren't accidents of fame. They were patterns, which leads to the question we're all left asking: what happens when the spotlight burns too hot, and there's nowhere to hide?